This is the 6th video in my Crafting for Hope series, making a Star Trek themed mobile for my infant. Crafting for Hope is an art challenge and fundraiser in support of childhood cancer research. The others started with some felt ships that I made. The first was the Marauder, second was the Bird of Prey, third was the Enterprise D, and the fourth one was the Dakir. Now moving on to my space station, I'm doing Deep Space Nine. Here's some reference images I used to create this ship. Unlike the ships, I'm not doing needle felting, I'm doing a bit of mixed media, so it's a lot of paper craft and cardboard and metal to quasi-kit bash this thing together. So using my reference images, I've sized to these copper rings that I bought that are frequently used for making mobiles. I decided to show how much experimentation went into this project, so I do show some things that are fails as well as things that are successes. So first I try tracing my blueprint onto the cardboard that I want to use for the foundation of this piece, because it's going to be a bit of cardboard / paper mache. This does not work. As you can see, the image does not transfer despite rubbing as much lead as I could onto the back of the paper and trying to get that to transfer onto the cardboard. So then I decide I'm just going to cut out the template directly to the cardboard. I did save all these in case for some reason I ever want to make these again. I probably never will, but Deep Space Nine in particular, I'm not completely happy with how it came out, so I may actually make it again someday. So once I've taped my stencil down to the cardboard, I'm just using a razor blade to cut it out, removing all the sections that will be hollow. And I'm using masking tape to secure everything as tightly as I can, because the last thing I want is frays or something to not line up correctly, especially since I'm going to need to cut out 2 of these. Covering the whole stencil in tape was also necessary to prevent it from falling apart while cutting it. So now that I've got one side done and I can see my ring will fit, I'm going to cut another one. The idea being I will sandwich the ring in between the 2 halves. Now that my horizontal is done, I'm moving on to my vertical. So I want to use these same rings because DS9 has 3 of these docking ring areas around it that are pretty close in diameter to the circumference of the horizontal plane of the ship, but it's not perfectly shaped. Like, they're not perfect circles. So I'm gonna have to cut this ring, and I have a ton of these rings, so I cut 3 pieces, even though you'll just see me cut 2 pieces here, cutting this one in half. So once I get this cut, I then have to shape it a bit, and I do actually have to trim them back a bit. I wish I'd trimmed them more than I had, because it's not quite right once the cardboard's on, but it's close enough. I don't think the baby's gonna yell about it. Now I'm doing some sealing to try and protect the cardboard and make it as sturdy and resilient as possible, so that in case the child ever gets his hands on the space station, he won't immediately destroy it. So I'm just using some PVA glue and I'm coating the entire thing, brushing it all on and letting it dry overnight. Once that's all dry, I hot glue the two pieces together with the ring in the center, as mentioned before. This made it really, really sturdy. And I constantly, throughout this entire project with every ship, keep checking against my blueprints to make sure things are as close to proper dimensions as possible. Here you can see I'm shaping those rings a bit. They're just not perfectly rounded, so I have to stretch them a little bit. And here I've got a little hand drill. I'm just going to quickly drill some holes where these metal rings are going to go through. It just made it a lot easier because, again, I used hot glue and I have 2 layers of now PVA sealed cardboard, so it was just simpler to drill a little hole and push it through. You can see here that the rings are too long, so I do trim them. These are some glass bottle juice caps. They're an interesting metal. I think they're aluminum, but I felt like they were a really ideal shape for trying to replicate the 2 areas on the top and the bottom of the ship. On the top, it's the promenade operations or ops and the communication array. Oh, and deflector shield. They're all on the what I'll call the top. The bottom is power transfer conduits, so that's just going to be the wires I'm going to leave on there, and the main fusion reactor, which I will be adding a little piece at the end to accent further, but it's on a very rounded disc type shape, so this worked out well. Here I'm just marking where I'm going to trim back these wires to make them sized a bit more correctly. I still probably should have trimmed them more than I did, but again, I put cardboard on top of these too, so I think that and being conservative with my trimming, I just didn't quite get it as far as I should have. Now I'm going to hot glue all of these pieces in place so that they're really secure on the ship. I was satisfied enough with my trimming when I was able to get it to stand up straight on the docking pylons and decided that I would stop trimming there. Time to move on to coating with cardboard for this next blueprint. So you can see here I'm cutting out the parts that will be cardboard on top of the wires because I didn't want just wires because they're not quite the right shape. And I'm just following the same process I did with the horizontal plane of the space station. I made templates for all of these so that they're all the same shape, and I coated everything that was cardboard with PVA, as you can see here, and let it cure overnight. There's one docking pylon complete, and I just do the same process for the rest of them. I have no idea what this next part is called. They're sort of like fins or wings. It's like a style thing, I think, on DS9, or Terrak Nor, as the Cardassians like to say. I couldn't find what they're called in the blueprints, and there aren't really any things indicated inside them. So again, not sure if they're just style or what, but I needed to add them because they're on the space station. Now it's time to play in the kipple. I keep some random junk that I never know if I might want to use for projects like this or other kit bashing type stuff with miniatures. So I'm just digging through this bag and trying to see if I can find anything that would work. I was a bit nervous about this because I really want to make it as safe as possible in case it ever falls or my infant gets his hands on it. So I am securing everything as much as possible. I've got this little pin here that I'm going to hot glue down into that hole to secure it into this metal piece, and then I'm just hot gluing layers on around it. This is the ops promenade and communication array side. So I spend all this time trying to use hot glue and put this thing together, and I hate it, and I rip it off, and I try again. As I said, this video is going to show a bit of my trial and error because there was a lot of it. So here I've taken another piece of junk that I found and some of these stick-on gems, and I glue two halves together, and then I test them on top of this little piece of plastic, and they look much closer to the shape that I'm going for. So again, I've embedded that metal pin inside because I want to have it stuck in as well as I can, and then I hot glue it into the middle of the metal dome piece from earlier. Now there's a bunch of rings that make up the promenade. Again, I'm just trying to get this closer to the shape if I can. It's not exact, but this is as good as I could do with what I had. So I'm just sanding these metal washers down. Now I'm switching to super glue because the hot glue was very messy and driving me crazy, and I really wanted this to be very, very secure. And metal does not always hot glue very well, so I figured I would switch it up and use baking soda as my accelerator and super glue these into place. I'm just using a brush to try and clean it up as much as possible, because once the super glue touches the baking soda, it pretty much instantly hardens, so you want to be very exact with where you put it. Now on the flip side, I've got this old control unit off of my dryer. I'm going to be stealing a red LED light from this to use for the main fusion reactor, which is a red glowing bulb off the bottom of the ship. It was extremely tempting to make this actually light up, but that was just far too complicated for this already very experimental project. So for this, I use the LED's pin. I put it in the hole of the metal cap. I bend it so that it's kind of hooked in there. And then I'm going back to my baking soda and super glue and securely super gluing it in place. Back to my cardboard. These funny little fin things actually had a name and supposedly a purpose, so I can say that these are defense sails. Here's some pictures of the ship after it's been spray primed. I used Citadel Color Chaos Black primer for this, and it adhered great to everything. Metal, paper, plastic, didn't matter. Yet more lost footage. I have missed out on the initial painting after priming, so I used my acrylic Vallejo chainmail silver to cover the entire space station. Since all the base coating's done, I'm now moving on to details. Similar with the rest of the ship, I've made a lot of stencils for this because it has a lot of symmetry. I wanted it to look really clean. So I'm just using some masking tape and eyeballing what the triangular shapes look like. And I'm using the Vallejo acrylic Glorious Gold for all of these triangles around the outer ring. Once those are done, I'm using bright bronze acrylic Vallejo on the defense sails and docking pylons details. Painting the yellow and little white windows on the habitat ring. Painting the little white windows around ops. And I decided that I really hated the Glorious Gold, so I was going to change the color and used hammered copper instead. I found it really tricky to decide what colors to use for the space station. It's one of those things where when you watch references from a show, there's different lighting and different angles, and especially when it's metallics, it doesn't always look the same. So I had to make some stylistic choices, and sometimes I did not like how those looked, so I redid them or changed them. Just painting the red details that are around the main fusion reactor dome. Now that all my painting's done, I've decided I'm going to use a satin varnish on the whole thing, pull back any gloss that's happened from my paint. And time for the final shots. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. There is a final video left in this series, which is going to be the full mobile assembly. I'm hoping to have that done in the next 2 weeks, so please stay tuned. The fundraiser just ended the other day, but if you're interested, please consider donating to St. Jude's Research Center anyway. It's a great cause. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more of me making my art, please like, follow, and subscribe.